hounds, chase ghosts, come sleep, watch out, demons are coming, run, sleep, hide, spirits, ghosts, hide, demons, hounds, ghosts, demons are coming.
Welcome home, my little hellhounds. Tonight we have 5 more subscriber stories for us to sink our hellish teeth into. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new and like the video, as this really helps the channel. Also, make sure to click that bell icon so you get notified every time I upload. If you have any stories you want narrated on the channel, then submit them to Reddit r/homeofscares. I will put the link in the description, and follow me on Twitter at homeofscares. Now let's get right into it. Unsightly thing posted by Bloody Spaghetti. Every single night, for as long as he could remember, Johan would climb up the hilltop, not far from his family's ranch, every single night. After being done with the farm work, Johan would climb that hilltop to pray. Johan wouldn't pray for a resolution of an issue that had plagued him, nor for a cure to a terrible disease. He prayed for something rather simple and pointless at first glance. Johan prayed to be visited by an angel. He had neither a request to make nor a desire for a personal blessing. The man merely wished to behold an angel in all of its celestial glory. Johan grew up a member of the Orthodox Church, the church which venerates the angelic hosts. On top of his Orthodox upbringing, Johan's community had a few accounts of divine intervention, imitations of Byzantine decorating the interior of his local church awed him to no end. That and the descriptions of heavenly beings caused a man to lust for a glance at the children of his Lord. It was after an innocent wish, was it not? The mere will to behold the sacred glory of the hosts. Johan prayed every single night to be allowed to view the sight of an angelic entity. He was nothing short of a pious man. After years of praying and wishing, the Lord had finally allowed it. On a cloudy night, right after Johan had finished his nightly prayer, the sky cracked with a thundering noise. Assuming the rain was about to pour, Johan made his way down the hill, hoping to make it home before he got drenched. As he made his way down, the voices of a choir echoed through the night sky. The singing was so beautiful, it was almost surreal, prompting Johann to stop and look around, hoping to find the source of the singing. He could not even understand the singing at first. Looking left and right, the man could not see a thing. Looking up, he saw the clouds being torn apart. The sight stunned the man, and he stared as the clouds drifted farther apart, revealing a menagerie of beautiful colours, unlike the ones he had ever seen before. There were all kinds of shades he could not name or even properly fathom. It was so bright and beautiful, both vibrantly luminescent and dim, shifting that way and that, like a living rainbow. The longer the farmer stared, the more unearthly details seemed to fill his field of vision. Johann stood frozen in place as the singing of the choir had slowly become clearer, and the thing above him in the sky grew more bizarre. In no time, the man faced a massive structure made up of lights, heads and eyes, flapping grotesque wings and animal parts. Was this an angel? In Johann's mind, the idea made no sense. Angelic entities must be beautiful. That's what he was taught. The artistic depictions, the scriptures, all paint the holy hosts as an army of beings of untold beauty. Once the heavenly being revealed its full glory to Johann, it struck the man with terror. His heart was attempting to escape through his ribcage, his eyes glued to the unsightly thing above him, and his ears flooded with the singing of the angelic choir. The presence of the celestial entity burnt out Johann's eyes. He screamed like a wild animal as the withering animal's parts, ever-shifting eyes and wings, danced around burning miniature suns, until the farmer could no longer tell one from the other. He screamed for as long as his eyes were burning, until there was nothing but the eerie darkness left. Once robbed of his sight, the man finally tore his gaze away from the sky and collapsed to his knees. The singing of the choir became painfully intelligible, and a thick liquid ran down the man's cheeks. The voices started off warm and inviting, turned hollow and cold as they sang, "O child of the arch-human, behold the luminous heavenly sunrise, as the ether flows above with the soil of the garden coiling below in abyssal water. The locusts of the Pentacrator are beset by ravenous hunger, praised thee for your sacrifice." Johann's heart sunk. The meaning his encounter with the divine weighted greatly on him. The weight of a Philistine temple seemed to grow on top of his shoulders. Johann for his poise, as he could be not accept such a fate. He tried to protest, to reason with the angelic entity, but it was too late. Before he could even utter a sound, the skies rained fire upon him. All he could do was scream, as the heavenly flames ate at his flesh. All he could do was scream until there was not enough of him left to do so. Sewer line to the past, posted by MTP6921. Buying an old house from the mid-1800s saves money at first, but with all of the maintenance repairs, it's debatable if starting from scratch is a better option. The old house my wife Gina, my 6-year-old daughter Grace and I live in has a lot of character, but once again another unexpected problem has come up. This time it's the toilet leaking. Granted, this can happen in any home older than 10 years, but it seems like this is just one of many issues that has to get done. I begrudgingly went to Lowe's to buy a toilet that's on the cheaper end. If I brought the more expensive one, then it would probably last twice as long, but I typically go with whatever is the cheapest when I buy something. I would have preferred to put this time in updating the kitchen cabinets. However, plumbing issues seem to take priority because the leakage can cause major additional damages to the house. I brought the new toilet home and opened the instructions. I'm hoping I can do this by the time Gina gets home from work and Grace gets home from school. As directed, I unscrewed the old toilet. Then I used an old rag to get rid of the excess water. As I got rid of the water, I hear a very faint noise coming from the sewer pipe of the toilet. The sound is saying, "Hello, is there someone there?" I really just want to get this toilet completed. From past experience, nothing ever fits properly when I do any kind of plumbing replacements in the house, though I'm taken off guard by hearing the voice. I don't know much about sewer pipes, and I don't know if this voice is coming from one of the nearby development houses or from the sewer itself. I respond, "Who is this? Where are you?" The voice responded, "Have they left yet?" I respond, "Has who left yet?" The unknown voice said, "The army. Are they still there?" The voice sounds like an adolescent male, maybe about 18 years old, give or take. My house is in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, where the last homegrown wars came from, the Revolution and the Civil War. I respond, "What army are you talking about?" Then he said, "Lincoln's army. I'm in the well. Mr. Abraham told me I had to take his place when he got drafted, and I'd sure rather stay here than march down south and get killed. 2 minutes ago I was worried the new toilet wouldn't fit. where the existing one was in place, and now I have some unknown voice playing a prank on me. I go along with the ruse, and I say, tell Abraham to go fight his own war, and now I have to finish putting this toilet in. He then says, sir, you don't understand. I'm indentured to Mr. Abraham Kleinoff for another 5 years for the carpentry apprentice. Once again, I half-jokingly respond, well, this is America, and Mr. Abraham can't force you to join any war. Only Uncle Sam can do that, which hasn't happened in nearly 40 years. The voice responds, can you please help me get out of this well? Please, sir. I respond, what well are you talking about? The voice responds, the one by the side of the house. I then jokingly said, I'm sorry, young man, there's no well here on this property. We just turn handles now to get water. The voice said, what handles are you referring to? Then I said, listen, my wife and daughter are going to be home in about half an hour. I don't have time for games. If this toilet doesn't get put in, then I'm going to need an outhouse. The voice then said, I don't know what a toilet is, but the outhouse is on the right side of the house. I then said, oh yeah, and where is the well? The voice responded, sir, I climbed into the well on the right side of the house. I then said, young man, there's no well or outhouse on this property. I lived in this house for 15 years now. The voice then said, sir, please look in the basement at the support beam closest to the side of the road. I carved my initials, DBR, for David Boyd Reister. I'm now pissed off because the time it will take me to look in the basement for something that doesn't exist is the same amount of time it will take me to finish this toilet. I decide to go into the basement. I know the beams are original to the house. They are actually crudely cut trees and not lumber that is purchased from Lowe's or Home Depot. I've looked through this basement so many times from all the work that I have done, and I know there's no carvings anywhere. I put the flashlight on my cell phone on, and I look at the obvious underbelly of the beam, and I see nothing. Then I look at the left side of the beam, and I see nothing. Then I carefully look at the length of the right side of the beam, and I say, oh my God, out loud. It was just something that I had never noticed before. The DBR initials were just so indiscreet that I never would have seen it unless I was looking for it. If I have seen initials carved into old trees before, and these initials definitely looked very old. I only have about 1/10 of an acre in the backyard, where the house is sandwiched in between a road and a creek. I decide to get the shovel and take 20 steps from the right side of my house. Then I start tearing apart my lawn. I dig and dig, and I don't see anything unusual. My daughter Grace comes home and sees me in the backyard. She looks at the mangled up backyard and says, "Dad, what the heck are you doing? Mum is going to kill you." I said, "I'm just looking for something, dear, don't mind me." Knowing the lack of a toilet issue is going to become a horror story at any moment, I start digging like my life depended on it. As I moved as close to the road as possible, the shovel came across something big and unmovable. As I dug away the outline of this unknown object, I realised that it was a metal plate that someone had put over an old well. I instantaneously felt every emotion that someone could feel all at once. I was completely shocked, so much so that I forgot about the toilet that needed to be installed and everything else. I just stood there with both hands on the shovel. I thought to myself that this well hasn't been accessed in probably at least 50 years. Whoever is down there can't be speaking because they had no air to breathe. Granted, the sewer line is right next to the old well, but neither of them connected to each other. I'll go back into the house and say, "Hello, hello, David, hello, hello, Mr. Reister, are you there?" I say this over and over with no response. My wife Gina comes home and hears me yelling in the bathroom. Gina says, "Why are you yelling into the sewer pipe? Who's David? I really need to pee." About 15 minutes of continuously calling out to the mysterious voice, I got no response. I finished the new toilet installation and decided to say nothing to my wife or daughter about the voice coming from the toilet. Once a day for weeks, I would yell into the toilet and I never got any further responses. One nice spring Sunday afternoon, my daughter Grace asked me if I wanted to take a walk. I said sure, and she took me to the old church in town, which was a 20-minute walk. I asked her, "Why do you want to go to this old church, Grace?" She said, "Come over here, let me show you something." I followed her lead and she took me to this old white grave that was about 2 feet high and 2 feet wide. The inscription on the grave said, "David Reister, mortally wounded at Gettysburg, 1865. I grabbed my head to stop my brain from spinning after seeing the gravestone. I said, "Honey, how did you know to come to this church?" She said, "Daddy, the toilet told me this morning." Not knowing what else to do, so I discussed the situation with my wife, who at first was skeptical, but then I showed her the initials in the basement and let Grace say what she heard from the toilet, where my wife became convinced that we could no longer live in the house. We moved a few blocks away and I decided to keep the old house in our possession and not sell it. After doing research, I discovered Abraham Kleinoff was the original owner of the house and land. Even with that knowledge, I decided to rightfully honour the true patriot, so I made a wooden marker and put it on the side of the house which read, "The David Reister House, built 1862, thrusted into darkness to allow light for so many others. The Squire's Daughter and the Devil, posted by Black Cat 1206. The Squire's Daughter and the Devil's Dance. There was once a wealthy but kind squire in Gaelic, who lived in a huge castle or mansion along with his 3 young beautiful daughters, Fada, Kira and Naim. Their beloved mother had passed away 5 years back. It was a dark, cold, stormy Christmas Eve night when the devil paid Squireen Roche a visit. The Squireen invited the devil to dine with them, and the devil did. The Squireen invited the devil to play cards with them, and the devil did. The devil, being the devil and a crafty, conniving and wretched creature, made a wager with the old Squireen. Now the devil had taken quite a shine to Squireen Roche's youngest daughter and wanted her for himself. The devil told the Squireen he would play cards with him, but if he won 3 rounds, then the radiant fair Naim would be his forever, and he would dance her back to hell to live as his bride for all eternity. The Squireen felt obliged to agree. Who turns down the devil? The devil, being the devil, cheated at cards, and so thought he had tricked himself into getting a beautiful, young, innocent bride to corrupt. The devil underestimated Naim though, for Naim means bright in Gaelic, and Naim certainly lived up to her name. She did not want to be the devil's wife, and so, along with her 2 sisters, hatched a most devious plan that would put the devil himself to shame. They filled up a beautiful red silk bag with salt, and Naim hung it around her slender neck. When the devil came to claim Naim, they began to dance. But we all know that demons cannot tolerate salt at any cost. It is like poison to them, and the devil is the king of demons. On noticing the beautiful bag, the devil's curiosity and greed got the better of him, and he tore it off the fair, clever maiden's neck. Ripping the bag open, he gazed upon the pure white salt, and with an awful part wail, part growl, he fled the old Squireen's castle or mansion, and scurried all the way back to hell, leaving the family to enjoy the festivities of the season in peace and tranquility, as they deserved. This lovely folk tale was told regularly to my cousins and I as kids by our beautiful Irish gran, and it always made me laugh and gave me shivers in equal measures. Baby's Cries in Dead End Alley, posted by BlackCat1206. When we reached 10 years old, my cousin and I were allowed to play on the street just outside my auntie's house. There was a busy lane which ran beside the side of the houses, where all the kids used to run up and down, kick a football around, rode their bikes, and generally messed around. I liked it because I had a long walkway to practice pushing my wheelchair without the danger of the main road. And my cousin, our friends, and I spent hours of fun running and wheeling up and down that lane. There was a funny little dead-end alley just leading off the lane, which always had a weird vibe around it. There was only one house at the end of the dead-end alley, as all the kids used to call it. The house was different from all the other houses around it. The others were bright, colourful and cheerful, full of life, with neighbours talking over the fences with one another and always ready to tell us kids off, tongue in cheek, for making too much row. A typical slang term for noise in West London. The house down Dead End Alley was always dark. Even on a sweltering hot summer's day, it always seemed to have a gloom hanging over it, like a dark, ominous cloud. Obviously, we, being merely 10 years old, were banned by my mama and aunt from going anywhere near the alley, let alone the empty, abandoned house. Although my older cousin and his mates, who were 13, hung around Dead End Alley from time to time, with the sole purpose of frightening his little sister and me with horror stories of the house and its imaginary, monstrous inhabitants. Having heard rumours about the dark history of the house, although not knowing anything concrete, the house had the dubious reputation as a haunted house. One typical summer's day, my cousin and I were playing in the lane with our friends. We kept hearing a baby crying. Now, being in the middle of a council estate, it is not uncommon to hear a baby cry, so we paid no attention. However, as the afternoon wore on, the baby's cry became louder and constant, almost deliberate. That got our attention, and we all decided to investigate the noise. So we stopped playing and began to look around. To our horror, after searching for the root of the noise, we realised that the baby's cries were originating from the front garden of the Dead End Alley house. One of our friends, who was slightly older, said he would go nearer to have a look. We were all concerned by now, as it seemed obvious to all present that it was a real baby who was in distress, but everyone present also pleaded with him not to do it. But he was, and still is, a very principled, moral person, and his conscience overcame him. We waited for 10 minutes until he came back. He looked awful. His face was white as a sheet, and he looked physically shaken. He told us that he went into the garden, but there was no sign of a baby anywhere. His best mate asked him if he saw anything else, and just nodded and said, "I don't want to talk about it." Nobody forced the issue. In fact, I think everyone was secretly relieved about it. We left very quickly and returned to the safety of home. Years after, my cousin and I were talking to her mum, and she began to tell us about the history of the local area. The subject of the dead-end alley house came up. We were horrified by what my auntie told us. It still gives me chills talking about it now. In the 1940s, the area where their family lived was way more rougher than it was present day. Lots of domestic violence, gangs, prostitution and unwed mothers. Also a high pregnancy rate, which is to be expected in some ways, what with the war. Along with it came a fair percentage of unwanted babies. It turns out that the house in Dead End Alley was a baby farm where women took their babies that they couldn't look after or didn't want to women or couples, and for a fee they would take these abandoned infants in and find good homes for them. It was said by the locals that the couple running the baby farm were quite an unsavoury pair, and there were rumours at the time of coercion and intimidation of young unwed mothers to give the awful couple their babies, and neglect and abuse of their young charges. Then the scandal was uncovered. In the 50s, my auntie didn't know the full facts. The remains of several infant babies were found in the front garden in a shed where the husband kept his gardening tools. The couple were obviously charged with murder, and because of the number of remains discovered, they were put away for a long time. We don't really know the truth is of what happened that hot summer's day long ago, but my cousin and I have our theories. My cousin still lives in the same house with her own family and my auntie, and every time my husband and I visit them, I still get the chills when passing by Dead End Alley. And our friend who went to look for the distressed baby, who my cousin and I are still friends with, has never revealed what he saw in the garden of the Dead End Alley house. The real definition of being alone in the wilderness, posted by MTP6921. I can remember tiptoeing through the woods as my father, along with the other men, tried to fend off the Shawnee attacks. My father was a mild man who lacked entrepreneurship, but was a hard worker who was eager to do anything to provide for his family. My father, Samuel Tillsman, became childhood friends with Daniel Boone and followed Daniel wherever opportunity presented itself. I can recall my mother's reluctance of leaving North Carolina to go to West Kentucky. My mother would have preferred to be dirt poor than risk her family's life navigating through the Appalachian woods to Kentucky. Daniel was just one of those men that could own the whole of North America, then would go to Europe to try to own that as well. So here I am at the age of 12, tracking through the dense forest along with 50 other families. We learned individually to stay with the travelling group, or we would be prime candidates to be stolen by the Shawnee or other Indian tribes. Words can't describe the terror that constantly lingers, knowing that the 50 men in your party were the only thing that was protecting you from a possible attack from hundreds, if not thousands of Indians. There was no call for help if an attack occurred, and there was no army coming to rescue us. The Indians didn't care if I was 12. They would torture me just as quickly as they would one of the adult males. We finally settled in an area of Kentucky that Daniel named Boonesborough. We had to build a fort to stave off Indian attacks, so every person, young and old, had to help clear the land and make wooden posts for the fort. You had to constantly look over your shoulder for a tomahawk being thrusted at your skull as you worked. I knew we were trespassing on Indian land that the Europeans have never settled. After a week's worth of non-stop work, we managed to complete half of the fort. At nightfall, I could hear noises coming from the wilderness. It was the most terrifying sounds that could ever be produced. The noises were from Indians howling to let us know that we were all going to be attacked soon. I didn't know if there were 5 Indians or hundreds of Indians. We were all so exhausted from working all day. Daniel was one of those unique souls who really didn't need to sleep or really rest either. Daniel put all the women and children in the middle of the fort, and any boy over the age of 11 had to bear a rifle. The only thing I ever shot at were squirrels, and now within moments I'm going to be fighting battle hardened warriors. I was stationed on an elevated log perched above the completed portion of the fort. The partially constructed fort was made up of 6-foot walls made from log piles. My father told me to watch for flying projectiles, to include arrows, and to reload my rifle as quickly as possible, and to aim for the enemy's chest. I could only see a short distance in front of me because of the darkness. I can hear the intentional ruffling of leaves. Everything the Indians did was deliberate to petrify us. Then, out of nowhere, they came storming out of the woods. I tried my hardest to reload as quickly as possible as an arrow whizzed by my face. I turned around and saw Daniel swinging an axe as the Indians attempted to breach the open side of the fort. I have never seen anything as quick and as violent as Daniel swinging his axe. He reminded me of the Viking stories I used to read about. as quickly as the Indians came. Then they quickly left. They were just sizing us up to see the strength in our numbers. Fortunately, we only had one minor wound, and there were 30 dead Indians. We were able to rest as Daniel assigned men to guard duty. There were no more attacks that night. The next day, we all were motivated to complete the fort as quickly as possible. After 3 days, the fort was completely surrounded by wooden posts. At least we had a barrier in between us and the Indian raids now. The Indians have been quiet the last few days, and we hoped they had decided that we weren't worth their troubles. As morning approached, I was awakened by the yells of men in our party who yelled, "Get to your position, get to your positions, they're coming." It's the most frightening sound to hear a man yelling for his life. This time I saw the warriors coming out of the woods. It looked like hundreds of bears running at full speed with hatchets and spears. I would hold my breath each time I fired. I was able to see the Indians fall when I aimed at their chest. The eye of the attack was aimed at the entrance of the fort. The Indians were able to force the entrance door open. Some of the men left their posts on the wall to fight back the Indians who made it inside. I can hear yelling and crying from the women and children inside the fort. Then one of the worst things that possibly could occur happened. The Indians who breached the fort's apparent mission was to grab and kidnap whoever they could. I saw them pull Daniel's oldest son, James, and another young male, Robert, out of the fort, then drag them into the woods. As the Indians dragged them into the woods, the rest of us were fighting off the remaining warriors. It was like watching lions taking their prey. When I saw James and Robert being dragged into the woods, the image still haunts me to this day. If I could have shot either one of them to forego the torture they were to soon face, then I would have, but the Indians purposely navigated them through the trees to keep both James and Robert alive. They were going to be used as macabre forms of entertainment for their tribe. Macabre forms of entertainment for their tribes. The Indians ceased their attack, and all of us were left exhausted. We lost 5 men and the 2 adolescent males, who would soon be dead as well. My father knew that the attacks would never end. He discussed with my mother the best thing to do regarding my survival. One of the men who died from the attack, Ambrose Tigler, had a daughter who was a year older than me. Her name is Sarah. She is visibly upset from losing her father. Her mother had died years ago from a fever and is now a virtual orphan. My parents decided on me to leave the fort and for me to take Sarah into the isolated Kentucky mountains to live our lives. We had traversed those mountains on the way to the fort we constructed. My parents knew the Indians would never stop attacking the fort until we were all dead, so hiding out in the mountains was the best way for survival. Daniel would not have agreed to us leaving. He wanted a community established at Boonesborough, but we had to leave in order to survive. My father gave us an axe and other equipment to help us survive. I knew once we left the fort, it may be the last time I would see my parents. I hugged them, and then Sarah and I left in the cover of darkness one July night. We had about 3 days worth of food and a lifetime amount of lead and gunpowder. The walk could be around 6 miles. Sarah and I are equally terrified, walking through the woods, as we were as sitting ducks within the fort. The one thing we had going for us was that the Indians were kept occupied with the fort and hopefully didn't see us leave. My father told us to settle near the mountain-fed lake that we saw when we came from North Carolina. All the water and fish we need would come from the lake. Our survival was a long shot. I had never built a cabin before, but I've seen how they are built. We tiptoed through the woods, and we were relieved to find our final destination. We were virtually on the moon. The chances of us seeing anyone else for some time was slim to none. I had seen no evidence of Indians in this area, so we felt safe for the time being. We stumbled across a cave on the side of the mountain. It was now early dawn, and we could use the cave as shelter until we built a cabin. The first priority was for me to shoot a deer or something, or some other meat source. I was exhausted from the walk, so I intermittently closed my eyes as I waited for deer to pass by as I stay hidden. After about 3 hours, I was able to shoot a deer. Sarah and I both skinned and prepared the deer meat. We were also happy to have our first fur. The noise from our rifle would be the best indicator if the Indians knew where we were on the mountainside. I was starting to get settled into the mountainside cave. Sarah, on the other hand, was still grief-stricken by the loss of her father. Some days she could barely move. The combination of the Indian attacks, the loss of her father, and living in these remote mountains were becoming too much for her. After about 3 weeks living in the cave, Sarah and I both fell asleep after talking about life back in North Carolina. I woke up in the middle of the night and saw that Sarah had disappeared. I searched for her for hours, but she never returned. I believe she had mentally checked out and had just wandered into the woods, where she would never be able to find her way back because the forest was too dense and there were really no paths or roads. Now here I am at age 13, all alone. I had to keep my mind from going insane, so I decided to focus on hunting and trapping animal furs. I would amass a ton of furs and hopefully become rich from them. Every day I got at least one animal, either a mink, a beaver, or sometimes even a bear. 2 years had passed and I never built the cabin. I was fine with the cave, other than seeing an occasional Indian miles away. I have had no contact with anyone. I have grown accustomed to the quietness. I have amassed hundreds of furs, and I will unload them, I say to myself, someday. I decide to walk to see the fort and my parents. My parents had discouraged me from doing this, but I needed some type of human contact. I remembered the horrors of the Indian attacks, so I did my best to remain as silent as possible. As I walked back to the fort, after walking which felt like for many hours, I was finally able to see the fort. I was surprised that I didn't see or smell any smoke or hear any rumblings as I got closer to the fort. As I arrived at the entrance, I was shocked to see the fort was abandoned and there were no signs of a massacre. It looked like to me everyone had just upped and left. There were no messages or clues for me to decipher where they had gone. I don't know if my parents are alive or dead. If they are alive, did they leave me and go back to North Carolina or Pennsylvania? I now feel completely abandoned. The fort was a mental continuum for me. It made me think that I wasn't truly alone in this uninhabited land, but now I truly am, and it will be something that I will have to accept. Well, that's it for tonight, my little hellhounds. If you liked tonight's stories, then don't forget to click that like button and subscribe and click the bell. If you have any stories or encounters you would like narrated on the channel, then submit them to Reddit r/homeofscares and follow me on Twitter at homeofscares. Now, good night, my little hellhounds.